Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our hands-on review of the CHUWI Hi9 Plus. This is a 10.8-inch Android tablet that sells for around $200 and offers pretty good value for the money. It has a 2K resolution for the display, which is extremely sharp and a feature that's usually reserved for more expensive flagship-grade tablets that are certainly more expensive than just $200. It also has support for an active digitizer pen, a stylus that has over 1,024 levels of pressure sensitivity that allows you to doodle and draw if you are a graphic artist by installing some applications that you can use for note-taking and for drawing purposes. There's also an optional keyboard cover folio case that you can pick up for about 20 to 30 bucks if you also want to use it as a 2-in-1 convertible for note-taking and typing out things like a laptop. So it promises a lot, again, for not too much money, especially considering this is one of the larger sizes that you'll find from an Android tablet at this price point. So if we take a closer look at its design here, we do have respectable bezels, I'd say, and it does have a webcam on the front for video chatting that's 8 megapixels, and otherwise if we turn it over, the tablet is made out of a unibody aluminum, so it feels very solid in terms of construction quality. The back also houses another 8 megapixel camera that's made by Samsung, and we also have dual speakers for multimedia. I wouldn't say these are the most immersive or bass heavy speakers in the world, but at least it's a stereo pair, and we'll be doing a demo in a moment. Now this particular tablet in the base configuration comes with a Helio X27 processor, which is deca core. It's in reality more of a mid-tier CPU, so it's similar to a Snapdragon 600 series in terms of performance. The tablet also comes with 4 gigs of built-in RAM, along with 64 gigs of built-in storage, which are both solid specs for the price. Another unique feature of this model is it comes with a SIM card slot, so you can pop in any 4G LTE SIM, and you can use it for web browsing when you're not connected to Wi-Fi. You can also use it to make phone calls. On the top spine of the tablet, you'll find access to the power key, which is accented in a dramatic red, along with a volume rocker. On the top, there's a 3.5mm standard headphone jack and a USB Type-C port for charging. The tablet takes about 3 hours to completely charge up its 7,000 milliamp hour capacity battery, and it reached about 8.5 hours of video playback in our testing, which is about average, I'd say, for a 2K display 10-inch tablet. Otherwise, the bottom here features the magnetic pogo contacts for the optional keyboard dock, and by the way, the stylus, which is called the HiPen H3, is also compatible with some of CHUWI's other tablets running on Windows. Although there isn't a slot to tuck in the stylus when it's not being used, the bottom portion of the tablet is magnetic. Again, it's designed primarily for the keyboard dock, but if you're not using that, you can also leverage the magnets to kind of suck in the stylus and kind of hold it in place, although it also covers up the contacts for the keyboard as a result, but it does stay in place like so. Overall, the tablet feels much more premium than the price would suggest, again with its all-aluminum build, with its slightly curved edges on the glass for the display, and its delicate chamfered edges. It's also slim and relatively lightweight, which makes it so easy to hold and just take with you, despite the fact that it's larger than, say, an average 8-inch or 7-inch Android tablet, which are a bit more portable. Now, as a quick comparison with some of CHUWI's other products, which we also briefly touched on in our unboxing video, the design language is essentially a oversized version of the Hi9 Pro. Now, despite having the Pro branding, the Hi9 Pro is actually the smaller version of the tablets and also has a slightly weaker processor and spec sheet, but it's also a little bit cheaper, although it doesn't support the stylus and the keyboard. Another tablet from CHUWI, it's the HiPad. We'll be doing a separate comparison video soon because both of these tablets do have the same Helio X27 processor, pretty similar price points, but the HiPad is styled and advertised for gaming as opposed to the Hi Plus, which again, supporting the stylus, is more meant as a productivity model. Now, first in things that we can talk about is going to be the display. Now at 2K, as aforementioned, it's extremely sharp, and you'll definitely not have any problems when it comes to enjoying this for the purposes of multimedia, for drawing, for web browsing. Everything is pin sharp in terms of text and details. The only slight downside is because there are so many dense pixels that the tablet needs to push around, and the fact that the processor isn't, the most top-of-the-line CPU, sometimes you'll notice a little bit of jerkiness in terms of its animations, which if CHUWI had chosen, say, a Full HD or 1080p panel instead, the animation might be a little smoother. However, it's not too big of an issue. I'd say the X27 is still going to be more than sufficient. Otherwise, the panel offers very good viewing angles. It is a full IPS display. However, it's not the brightest panel in the world. Right now, we are already at the maximum brightness, as you can see here, and it's for the most part legible even when you have a little bit of sunlight glaring on it, but for sure the maximum nits I think could be improved upon in the future, although perhaps this is a conscious decision because if they made it too bright in conjunction with having this really sharp resolution, the battery would probably drain even faster. For the price, I would say that the 2K panel is definitely one of its selling points, and what distinguishes it from many of its competitors is simply, again, that resolution and sharpness that you'll seldom come across. So the version of Android that's built on in here is Android 8.0 Oreo. Now in a blog, CHUWI has promised users an update to 9.0 Pi coming out soon. Now they did include a built-in wireless update app, which will automatically scan for software updates, and when available, install it. I've already installed one since getting this device out of the box, so it does seem like CHUWI is making some updates, so that's at least optimistic. Now in terms of built-in applications, you can see that there aren't a ton of bloatware built on in, which is definitely great news. As we touched on in the unboxing video, you just have a handful of the Google apps inclusive of YouTube, Drive, Gmail, Google Maps. So let's talk a little bit about the performance of the pen first, because I do think it's the second selling point of this model. Again, the first being that really sharp display, which you don't typically find for the price, especially a 10.8-inch panel. And again, the second feature is going to be that active Stylus support. The thing about Android tablets is, compared to Windows tablets, it's a little trickier sometimes to find apps which support pressure sensitivity for styluses right out of the box. I did find that ArtFlow is one application that does support the 10,024 levels of pressure sensitivity without any problems. So we can pinch in and pinch out if we want to, again, zoom in and get more fine details. And right now we are using it as kind of a pencil. So if I kind of shade very lightly, you can see that the line here is very faint, but if I wanted to draw kind of a hard line, as you can see there, it becomes much harder as well. So I can definitely go in and change the thickness as well as kind of shade in between them and get more delicate details, very similar to using a real pen and paper. Palm rejection is a little trickier and sometimes not as good as on a Wacom tablet, but you can still use it and kind of rest your hand on it and still kind of draw on here without leaving too many marks. The pen doesn't get confused or anything like that for the most part. So overall, certainly not bad, as you can see there. On this particular app, again, I think it's a pretty good choice if you are an artist, just because you're able to change a lot of things like the size of the brush. So you're able to change kind of the brush stroke and the thickness that you get. You can change the transparency, the different types of utensils that you have at your disposal, whether that's a regular pencil, whether that's charcoal, or if you want to take a look at different types of pen materials like a ballpoint pen, a marker. All of those things can be actually controlled from this directly. Another app that I mentioned in our unboxing video was the Wacom Bamboo Paper app, and this is a good note-taking app just because you're able to create different journals, and you can actually change the background of the journals to be a grid or to be a line, like a real notebook. And again, it supports palm rejection pretty well, but at the same time allows you to still write down some quick notes here and there. So if we go into some of the other features now, for example, the camera, as aforementioned at 8 megapixels, it's functional, but it's really not anything to write home about. It focuses in, it's a little bit slow to take a shot, but there is HDR, and for things like document scanning, I would say it does suffice. You can also record video up to HD resolution. So if we take a quick look at some of these samples, again, if you are patient with it and you hold still, you do get some decent enough results as far as tablets are concerned, but obviously it's not going to be a match for what you'll find on your smartphone camera, but overall also not bad, again, considering that this is a tablet. Colors for the most part are pretty accurate looking, even if some of the finer details might be a little bit missing compared to, again, a camera that you'll find on your smartphone, for example. So next, if we do a quick web browsing test and jumping into Chrome, we actually have quite a few tabs open in addition to different apps, including the drawing apps and some games, and you can tell how the performance has been still pretty smooth. I think that's definitely helped by the combination of the 4 gigs of RAM, and the Helio X27, which performs better than expected. Scrolling is still pretty fast, and as a whole, text is completely legible just because of how sharp the screen is. Even these finer texts you can fully read and enjoy. Like the New York Times here, another very complex site with lots of ads which are loading along, and you can tell that overall it is actually doing a pretty good job in terms of rendering this complex page as well. With that being said, one thing I want to point out is that the Wi-Fi reception for this tablet is not the strongest I've come across. It's adequate, but it's slightly below average. Sometimes if I'm too far away from the router, I would say by another wall or by another room that's divided between the router, the connection does seem to drop in terms of its speed pretty significantly. The 4G LTE strength seems to be a little bit stronger than the Wi-Fi, so that's something to keep in mind. Now at 10.8 inches, the screen being pretty wide is also very comfortable for typing, even if you don't have the built-in folio case. You can tell how it's just very generous in terms of the key size, and this also brings us to the point where it has a very good haptic engine, surprisingly. Usually that's a weakness for budget phones and tablets, but that's not the case here. Whenever you tap on a virtual key, the entire thing vibrates, and it feels really stable, and it feels actually very real. So if you're holding the tablet like so and you're typing, the sensation is like you're actually pressing on a real button. All right, so here's a speaker test. Let's raise the volume. Takeaway is the speaker quality. I'd say it's average. For stereo speakers, I did kind of expect slightly louder and richer sounding speakers, to be completely honest, but it's definitely more than usable, and at least you get that stereo pair, which gives you some separation if you want to listen to a soundtrack or maybe a movie. It does give you more of an immersive sense. Finally, let's take a quick look at its gaming performance. Again, the Helio X27, we've already seen the high pad, so performance from other X27-based chipsets and tablets we've seen is pretty similar. This game here has slightly fancier kind of animations and graphics. It's more of a 3D-based title, but as a whole, you can see how everything is still rendering along pretty well. It's still relatively smooth, and not seeing too much drop frames, but the overall kind of graphics here are still rather impressive. Now, if I load up other more demanding games like Asphalt 9 or PUBG, it's definitely going to be slightly more taxing on the processor than, say, on a Snapdragon 800 series device. During gaming, it does get slightly warm after you use it for more than 20 minutes or so on the top portion of the tablet, and that is the part that's closer to the antenna. So this area here does get slightly warm, but never gets really hot to the touch. The X27 is not really a CPU that has thermal throttling issues. So that's more or less it for our hands-on review of the CHUWI Hi9 Plus. Again, for around $200 for the tablet, it's actually a pretty strong value if you're considering a budget Android tablet that gives you a very stock experience, and you want something with a large display with a high pixel resolution for the purposes of viewing back media content, watching videos, interacting with web browsing. In addition, you want something that supports that active stylus. That's going to be the two differentiating features of this model, in my opinion. Otherwise, the design, the build, and the performance are all pretty solid. They're, I would say, in line with a lot of the other mid-tier tablets on the market, and also starts to compete more and more with some expensive tablets as well. I think mid-tier phones and tablets here in 2019 have reached a point where they're already really good, and for the average consumer can more than suffice. You can learn more details if interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Also be sure to stay tuned for a comparison if you want to learn more about how it stacks up against some of CHUWI's other tablets that we've looked at recently. Thanks for watching this video here at OS Reviews. That's been the CHUWI Hi9 Plus.